Good morning. Glad that you're here with us this morning. I have new batteries, so get comfortable. I'm kidding. I always think that would be a great joke, but you know, they laugh nervously. They don't laugh as if it's a joke. You might really go the distance with those batteries. We're glad that you're here with us this morning. I want to look at a kind of another song, but we'll be in 1 Samuel chapter 8. I do have verses. We'll try. I've been working with this morning, and we got it to work pretty good. So Mitchell's on standby as always to push the button for me if I can. But title of the lesson is A Slow Fade. It's also the title of the song. We did a song a while back with regard to something that Casting Crowns had written. Is it Mark Hall? Is that his name? The lead singer of that group. All of a sudden I went blank. He writes a lot of their music. For some reason he resonates with me right now. And so there's some neat things. I want you to see the words of this. As we look, I think that they're something maybe that would help us be attentive, even as we look at our society and where things are going. We didn't get to where we are overnight. This has been a thing that's been progressing for some time. And I think it is for us in our relationship with God that we can begin to move ourselves or get in a position of comfort, or maybe we want to go a different direction, and we begin to take steps that at first seem innocent, and we'll see that with the Israelites. It doesn't seem like that big a deal until you get to an end result much later. But let's start with the words to the song. I think I have the words to the song. Did I do that?
Yes.
I didn't mean to do that. Can you put click on my PowerPoint and hit go live, and then put it on that little advanced slide, button. There we go. That song I know a little better. It'll make the sermon go better. The other song's a nice song, but it's going to complicate me just a little. All right, here's the song. Here are the words. I won't sing it for you because that would mess this whole thing up for sure. Be careful in lies what you see. It's the second glance that ties your hands as darkness pulls the strings. Be careful, little feet, where you go, for it's the little feet behind you that are sure to follow. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. It's a slow fade when black and white are turned to gray. And thoughts invade, choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. Pretty powerful words, I think. It goes on. Be careful, little ears, where you hear or what you hear. When flattery leads to compromises, the end is always near. Be careful, little lips, what you say, for the empty words and promises lead broken hearts astray. It's a slow fade. Come back to the chorus. When you give yourself away, it's a slow fade when black and white are turned to gray. And thoughts invade, choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. One more verse. The journey from your mind to your hands is shorter than your thinking. Be careful if you think you stand. Something Paul said, didn't it? Be careful if you think you stand. You just might be sinking. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. It goes on with that idea of losing direction. And it doesn't happen immediately. And I agree with the word. I think there are decisions that we make if we look back that led to other decisions that led us in a direction and take us to a spot where God is not. And the thing about that is that the reverse can also be true. The decisions I make and the direction that I take can move me to a spot where God is. But I have to be attentive to that, because Satan wants me to fade. And if we look at even our culture, in the absence of God in our culture, how did we get here? We faded as a culture. So let's look at 1 Samuel, because what I find, and the text that we're going to look at in 1 Samuel chapter 8 is something that the Israelites make a decision to do. And that decision is going to lead them down a path historically that is rather devastating. And God allows them to make that decision, as He allows us to make decisions. And what we see, and what I'll try to describe in the next few minutes, is there is a progression here. And I can see these things. If I can see it in the Israelites, I should be able to see it in myself, if I'm willing to be just a little bit honest with all of that. So let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 8. Notice what it says. Now, I put some emphasis on different places through the text in yellow. That's just to catch your attention. That emphasis is mine. It's not bold printed in your Bibles or anything like that. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations." And what I wanted you to pick up out of that is, as first we're introduced to Samuel's sons, and they made poor choices. You know, they would take some under the table as judges. Not a good thing. But the Israelites, the response by the nation of Israel was, "You are old," talking to Samuel, "and your sons don't walk in your ways." Those are going to become excuses. And if you kind of, if you understand really the backstory, they're wanting a king. Who is their king now? Well, they're a theocracy. They don't really have a physical leader. They do have Samuel, one of the last judges, but he's really a mouthpiece for God. And God would speak to him, to other religious leaders, because God ruled that country. And so they make an excuse there. And that excuse, I don't know, do you ever make excuses? Yeah. I used to give my grandmother a hard time. We were talking about this yesterday. My grandmother, Jean, I'd ask her if she'd want to go feed the horses with me. She really didn't like the horses. And she'd say, "Well, Jeff, I would, but I have this bone in my leg." I never knew what was wrong with the bone. I just knew she had one in her leg. And somehow it impacted her ability to feed horses. And so, but we do tend to make excuses when it comes to something that we want different, or we don't like the status quo. We make an excuse. Be careful, lies. Be careful, little ears. Because those things that we pick up may lead us to an excuse. We make excuses to justify why we are doing something, or why we need something, in this case, something that we want. We plead our case as if it's the most important thing, and we lose sight a little bit. I used this illustration several years ago, but it fits today. When there was when I was in about the 4th grade, one of the newest things for bicycles was mag wheels. No longer exposed, but they only had these big plastic. They looked really cool. Auto had a red and white, cheap to colors, had a red and white BMX bike with mag wheels. I needed that bike. It was not a want, it was a need. And I explained to my parents the need for that bike because I was going to start a flannel board ministry, and I needed that bike to go around the neighborhood and share with my flannel board what we had learned in Vacation Bible School. Now, how many of y'all remember my flannel board ministry? Yeah, it never happened. I didn't get that far. But that was my reasoning, you see. That was my excuse. I need this bike designed for all kinds of terrain, because there's a lot of rugged terrain in Friona to spread the gospel with the flannel board. Well, I got that bike, and I was so excited. Somehow I forgot about my flannel board. See how that works? Now it's intriguing because within a couple of months somebody else liked that bike and it was stolen. So the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. I wasn't going to do the flannel board ministry, I didn't get the bike. But we make these excuses, and that's really kind of the situation. We need a king. That's what we really need. That's the problem, because look at the situation here, Samuel. You're old, and we don't trust your boys. So where's this going to go? We need a king. So we pick it up in the next section, in verse 6. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them, according to all the deeds that they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. Okay, so Samuel's not happy about this, and he prays to God. Excuse me. And as he prays to God, God says, Samuel, just obey him. Give him a king. Because they're not rejecting you as much as they are rejecting me. And just so you know, this is not new. Since the time I brought them out of Egypt, I've had trouble with this people. So you give them a king, but give them the warning of what comes with the kingdom. What comes when you establish a king. And so it kind of begins there. So Samuel is going to do that. But here's the thing. We can catch up here just a minute. Maybe. They make excuses because they wanted to be like everybody else. Did you notice that in the text when they said that? Back in verse 5. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations. So we make excuses, and those excuses were, well, you're old, we don't trust your boys, and the underlying thing is we really want to be like everybody else. That's what we really want. And so he goes on. And I think that we face that too. You know, it hits us in different ways at different ages. When we're young, we just want to fit in because being different gets noticed and not always in the best way. You know, we don't want to be special. We don't want to be different. We want to be like everybody else. I can't tell you how many times when I was in school that I wished I was not the smallest kid in my class. I just wanted to be normal size. You know, when you're in 5th grade, you don't want to look up to your girlfriend. I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be bigger than the football. I wanted my pads to fit like everybody else's pads fit. But I think I looked like David with Saul's armor on standing out there. But it's the same for all of us. There are things that we get drawn to that we're not exactly a part of. And we get a little bit tempted. So we begin to make excuses, to find ways to fit in. Yet what are we called to be? We are called to be holy. What does that mean, holy? It means to be separate. We're not like everyone else, for good reason. We represent the alternative to the status quo, the normal. If I'm like everyone else, how can I show that I am different? That I don't live like the world lives? But here we are. Samuel being presented in some ways by almost a coup, except they didn't have someone yet in mind. But that's coming. But it comes with a warning. And so here's the warning that Samuel gives them. So Samuel told them the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king from him. And he said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you." I don't think you can get any plainer. He's not saying this might happen. This is what the king you want, this is what he's going to do. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s and some to plow his ground, notice his ground, and to reap his harvest and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and the vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. He will take your male servants and female servants and the best of your young men and your donkeys and and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But the Lord will not answer you in that day. Now let's just take a deep breath here for a moment and think about that warning. Here's what comes with the king. He's going to need money. And where there's no money, he'll take flesh. And where there's no flesh, he'll take life. Because he's got to run this big thing. And it'll be under the banner of your protection, and you're this or you're that. And you just need to give it all to the king. And actually, he didn't really say you're going to give it. He said the king's going to take it. Now notice verse 19. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. Okay, he warned them. Do you really want this? This is bad compared to what you have now. And I think that's our problem always. We're always looking at what we think is a greener pasture until we get there, and it has just as many thistles as the one I just left. But the people refused to obey Samuel, the voice of Samuel. They said, "No, but there shall be a king over us." And so here's what you have. Here's your fade, if you will. You start by making excuses. And the underlying reason you're making excuses is because you don't like how things are, because you're not like everybody else. And you just don't want to be persecuted anymore. You want to be like everybody else. And how you know you've gotten there is when you quit listening to God. Now, we know we're in trouble when we see these three things in our lives. And sometimes it comes from me reading something that God has asked me to do, and I don't want to do that. And so I go backwards almost. I want to be like everybody else, so I start making excuses. How well did that work for Jonah? I mean, look at the cast of characters who throughout Scripture chose to step away from God. In fact, the king that they choose, Saul, it won't be long before he steps away from God. So I want to encourage you to be careful about making excuses, especially excuses that lend you to being like everyone else and refusing to listen to God's instruction. I'm afraid that's happened all too often. And we find ourselves in a spot at odds with God because of some little decision we made here has led us to a spot here. And I'm going to have to learn that lesson. So what do we say? We sing the little song, don't we? Be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down in love. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be attentive to the things that you're looking at. Be attentive to the things that you're listening to. Be attentive to the things that you are doing. Be attentive to the places you are going. Because it's a slow fade. Bismarck Hall Road, people never crumble in a day. This is my encouragement and my challenge, because I think we're at a crossroads in our culture where we see what has happened in the absence of good things, good people, believers in God. At some point decided we got to be careful, we don't want to offend. And yet we know that Jesus offended by loving. And so we begin to make excuses. And now we have a culture that is absent of God. How do we get that back? Well, I don't know if that is or is not God's will for us as a nation. But as His people, how do we get God back? We'll look at that. We'll look at that next week. Because there's freedom in understanding how we get that back. If we can encourage you in your walk and in your relationship with our Lord, what do we encourage that? If you see this pattern working out in your lives, let's break the pattern. If you need prayers from this congregation, we are a prayerful bunch. Let us journey together as we move towards our eternal home with the Lord. Let us not go by ourselves. Let us go as a family. However we can help you this morning, we want to encourage you to stop the fade, to move in a direction that brings you in contact with our loving Savior and our holy God. However we can help, please come now as we stand and sing.